Hi folks, I'm Rich Bills and I'd like to take you on an adventure. Hi folks, I'm Rich Bills and welcome back to part 2 of my devlog about building a first-person immersive sim in Godot 4. First things first, I have a mic. I hope you can hear my dulcet tones a little better. I'm also changing tack a little. Even I don't want to sit and listen to a boring Yorkshireman for half an hour, so I've decided it's better to show and tell. By the end of episode 1, I'd adopted Godot's default character controller to use a state machine and implemented some mouse look and crouch. Enough to get us moving around. Not super impressive, but it's foundation work to build on. Let's see where we are a few days later. Welcome aboard the Peregrine. As you can see, a lot has changed since we were last here, but those fundamental systems I built in the first episode are still here, the entities, state machines and components. I focused on a couple of areas in the last few days, the UI, terrain and entity interactions, so let's start with the UI. A lot of this stuff is just placeholders or works in progress and are there just to get a feel for the look and placement. And everything does have a place. Navigation related elements are forward at the top of the screen ahead of the player, and character information is at the bottom closer to the player. I've tried to keep the middle section of the screen free, as this is where interactions happen and where player focus will be in game, or should be most of the time. Some of these panels are context sensitive. You won't always have a status effect, for example. They'll only appear when needed, so the screen won't always be this cluttered. I'll also probably get rid of the numbers you see everywhere. Even though this is a role-playing game and numbers are essential, they are essentially immersion breaking. On to interactions. There are principally two kinds of interactions in my game. The player interacting with the environment, bumping into things and being bumped into, and the player interacting with other entities, like picking up a ball for instance. Out of the box, the default character controller isn't a physics body, so it doesn't interact with other physics bodies in the world, like this ball for instance. As far as we're concerned, each other just takes up space in the world. So I've added some code to the character move state that detects collisions with other rigid bodies and imports the correct forces on each party. Kicking balls is a little tricky. You want to jump on top of them. I've got some code in development that will probably fix that. My other option was to stop using the character body altogether and switch to a rigid body. But even though this is an immersive sim, I want a more controlled arcadey feel to the movement. You can only really get that by directly controlling the body. Might change my mind about that down the line. So now our player can bump into and push things and move things around. I'm still using the Godot physics engine, but I've had to double the physics ticks and turn on interpolation. Struggle with that word every time. Otherwise you could push things through a wall. The second kind of interactions are far more interesting. Opening doors, pressing buttons, hacking locks, that kind of thing. Now my entities can be given interactions that they can respond to. This ball can be held, for example. An entity can have many of these interaction components. A door could be openable and breakable, for example. Each interaction neatly wraps the code just needed for it to perform its function. Most of them only have 3 methods. Can interact returns yes if the player has everything the hold component on the ball needs to be interacted with. In the case of this hold component, it makes sure the player has a hold grab component which tells it things like the player's strength and where the player wants to hold the ball. Get actions returns a list of actions that can be performed along with their associated hotkey, depending on the capabilities of the player and the state of the ball. I use this to populate the list of actions in the interaction dialog. And then there's the interact method. That passes the unhandled actions made by the player to the current entity in focus, and to see if it can handle it if it can. So I pass my left mouse click to the ball, and the hold component handles it, and the ball becomes held. Each interaction component on the interactable is queried in turn to see if they can do something with the input. In the case where there are two actions that share the same hotkey, only the first one takes it. Once picked up, the actions available to the player change. We can now drop, rotate, which is a little buggy for now, so I'll not push my luck with that, and throw, any entity that we give the hold component to. And the entity has to have the hold grab component. All the entities that can be moved in the world have got physics properties too. They've all got weight and physical properties. So for instance, this ball is bouncy and the chair isn't. Oops, try and throw it, there you go. Chair's not bouncy, ball is. There are plenty more of these interactions to come as well, but each one follows that same route, that same flow. Ask it what you can do with it, let the thing let you do the thing with it, perform the thing with it. So that's interactions for now. Let's have a look at terrain. The Peregrine is going to be a large ship. There's going to be a lot of terrain, so I've been building tools to help me out with that. Ideally, I'd like the Peregrine to be one open level with no cutscenes, but I am not averse to using cutscenes if performance dictates. The first tool is what I call auto terrain, which has two functions. It makes blocking out sections simpler and quicker, and more importantly, reduces the complexity of the level by combining collision shapes where possible. Auto terrain takes a base mesh and repeats it as many times as necessary and combines the collision shapes into one. In the case of odd-shaped things like this railing, I make custom terrain instances so I can hand-tune the hitboxes. I try to keep the hitboxes as simple as possible too. Most are just 3D rectangles, again with performance in mind. Another tool which underpins both terrain and entities is themes. A theme is just a collection of materials that can be applied to a piece of terrain or an entity. All the models have been built with theming in mind and are painted in base colours that are replaced by materials by the themer as required. For example, I have this red wall theme that can be applied to any wall sections, such as a wall with a window, or with a door. This means I can quickly colour or retexture whole sections quickly. Speaking of textures, everything is flat colours for now, but I do intend to replace them with high-res textures along the line. And that about wraps it up for this episode. I hope the new mic has been a bit better, and I hope you found the new format a bit more manageable, a bit less waffly. It's better for me too as I can get more done this way. I'm always very happy to go into more depth about any of this stuff that you've seen, so please leave a comment if there's something you'd like to hear more about. And please like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more about the Peregrine and the fate of its crew. Not sure what'll be in the next one until I code it, but there'll be more interactions for sure. Probably doors. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.